You're listening to Blue Jays Nation Radio with Cam Lewis and Tyler Yaremchuk, a member of the Nation network of podcasts and delivered by DoorDash.
Yaremchuk and Coombsy with you on a Sunday morning, the day after. Coombsy, you over it at all?
I don't even really know what to say about that. And I'm struggling to think how to put into words exactly what just happened, because that was just insane. I don't know if I'm over it per se. I think I've accepted that it happened, but there's going to be a long winter of just randomly looking back at the different moments involved in that game and wondering, how did that happen? And then how did this happen after that? And then how did this third thing happen after that? Like, it's insane to see that amount of things just go wrong basically in a row. Like, you saw Seattle just get some outrageous luck on and have some insane things work out for them. And it's just, you don't usually see that amount of things happen. But here we are.
No, you don't. Before we really dig into things, got to give some love to our friends at DoorDash. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. All you got to do, download the DoorDash app and enter the code GAMEDAY25. So the Jays get up 8-1 in this game. And, I mean, we're starting conversations, at least the people I was watching the game with, of, all right, you're going Stripling tomorrow. How quickly would you bring in Barrios? Do you trust him in game 3? All of that stuff. Because, again, they were up 8-1 in this point. And then the first sort of turning point would be after Kevin Gausman loads the bases. There's 2 outs in the 6th. And John Schneider makes the decision to pull the Jays starter and go to Tim Meza. Let's start with that decision there. What do you think?
Yeah, so the context of this is Kevin Gausman had been largely fairly dominant throughout the game. And then in the 6th inning, he allows back-to-back-to-back singles to load the bases. And then he gets the next 2 guys out. So it seemed like he kind of had it settled down.
Yeah.
But then John Schneider ultimately decides, look, and I'm kind of guessing on where his head's at with this, is he's probably like, okay, Gausman allows a lot of contact. One of the struggles for him this year has been, the other team puts the bat on the ball and ends up just on the grass. That's just what happened. And Tim Meza is a pretty good strikeout pitcher. He's been largely reliable in that spot. But the problem here is Carlos Santana is a switch hitter who hits lefties better than he hits righties. So John Schneider kind of gave Santana and Seattle a bit of an advantage in this spot. And Meza, who I think we kind of forget because he's been around forever, is also a rookie playoff pitcher. This is his first time pitching in a playoff situation. And it's a pretty significant amount of pressure to throw onto somebody. I think the move, pretty obviously, and everyone's pointed this out, would have been to just keep Gausman in. He's the veteran. He was pitching quite well. Even if he allows a few runs, then, well, he'll probably get out of it, and you can give the relievers a fresh inning the next inning.
Yeah, and that's what I obviously would have done. I mean, the pressure of putting Meza in his first playoff rookie, I mean, you're a rookie till you're not, right? Like, he's your best lefty reliever. If you were going to go on a playoff run, you had to use him in a pressure spot eventually. The idea that Santana hits lefties better, that's the big mistake, is you should have let Kevin Gausman, who had just gotten 2 big outs, let him finish that thing off. He's your ace. This is the playoffs. It's the bottom part of the Mariners order. Even if the numbers were reversed, even if it was Santana hits righties better than lefties, I almost would still be sitting here saying you should have kept Kevin Gausman in. That's your ace. You let him run, and he just got you 2 big outs. So that was the first big mistake. And I mean, that started the domino effect, but the idea, and there were people on Twitter, because of course there were people being like, well, John Schneider cost them the game. Well, you're up 8-1. One thing did not cost you that ball game. Like you said, there was a series of bad decisions, bad judgments by different people. Schneider, one of them. But there was also just a shitload of bad luck in that game. And after Garcia comes in, shuts him down, Jays get a run, it's 9-5, and you're like, okay, 8th and 9th here, you got Romano locked and loaded for even 6 outs if you need him. That's my thinking in the moment. And, I mean, turns out you need Romano for 6 outs, and you get them, I suppose, technically, but that was, or you don't quite get all 6, but that was the next thing that was just stunning, is that Jordan Romano came in and just couldn't put out the fire either.
Well, that's the challenge here too, is it Romano wasn't able to execute, or was it that the ball in center field probably should have been caught? Like,
yeah,
I'm not really trying to put blame on any one player or person in total, because I don't think that's the proper way to view this. I think it's just as a whole, everything went wrong. But you watch that ball go up into center field, George Springer's ripping in, looking to make an all-time iconic Blue Jays catch. And it seems Bo's kind of trying to do the same thing, but you'd think the move there would be to peel off and just allow the center fielder to make the catch, given he has the angle on it. And even if he can't make it, then, he's behind the ball, he can throw it in, keep it to 1 or 2 runs kind of thing. But the problem was that it seems like 2 different guys wanted to be a hero at the same time. And rather than just calming it down, slowing things down, and just making the right play. And I mean, it's so easy for me to sit here and say this from a fucking computer when I'm not the one playing the baseball game in front of 55,000 people screaming and being all excited, and the testosterone and the hype that comes into that. But again, it was another thing that you can't blame anybody individually, I don't think, but it just goes to show how many different things went wrong. Like, did Romano actually crap his pants, or was it just some weird, insane, divine thing that happened in the outfield?
Yeah. And that's where I'm at too. Like, I mean, if that ball from Crawford, like the 9-hole hitter of all people, if that ball hangs up for another third of a second, Springer's got it. Innings over. Jays are up 9-6. We're laughing. They win the game. We're sitting here this morning getting ready for a game 3 that would have started in 3 hours. But it just, and where I'm at today, like yesterday was like super depressing to like sit there and have to stew about that loss for as long as we kind of had to, with it being an early afternoon game. Today I'm just kind of waking up being like, man, like it clearly wasn't meant to be, when I sit here and look at our show notes and it's like, okay, this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong. And like, I mean, they get Bo into scoring position.
Yep.
Shit, would have loved a big playoff moment from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know he had an RBI in the game as well. I'm not saying Vladdy played bad by any means, but like, couldn't get the signature Vladdy moment. Couldn't get a big Matt Chapman home run when you maybe would have won it, right? Like, they needed one more big moment. And it's a shame that we're sitting here saying that, because they scored 9 runs. They got the big moments from Teoscar Hernandez. Like, that game should have been the staple, Teoscar game that kept their season alive with a good start from Gausman. And it's just a shame we're sitting here now looking at other parts of the lineup and being like, you couldn't come through. You couldn't come through for us. You couldn't come through either. Like, shit.
Yeah, it's pretty much everybody. You look up and down, and I mean, that's the thing, is I'm not interested in blaming Bo for getting in the way of Springer, or I'm not blaming Schneider for making the managerial decision. I'm not blaming Romano for not getting the job done. It's the whole collection. It's the whole team. And I mean, nobody really got the job done in that game when you look at it. Yeah, of course, Teoscar had his big game, so there you go. That's fantastic. But the only one reliever who came in and executed was Jimmy Garcia, who got 2 outs. Yeah. Everybody else was, Meza allows the bomb. Anthony Bass, who was their big trade deadline acquisition, the big veteran reliever they're bringing in, comes in, doesn't get a single guy out, allows 3 hits. Romano has, I guess, some unfortunate luck in his first inning with the Bo and Springer play, but then in his second inning, doesn't really execute. And I mean, even Adam Simber comes in to get the 1 out and walks 2 guys.
Yeah.
Like, nobody was really executing. And I mean, sometimes the guys just don't get the job done. And then sometimes you also have to look at the other side, and maybe the other side just did some really good things. Seattle got some luck. They absolutely did. The Jays kind of handed them something there, but they executed. And the other guys on the other team aren't just passive dupes. They're not just, computers playing. They're guys up there too, like doing things well to win. And sometimes you have to give them credit.
Yeah,
you have to give Carlos Santana credit for hitting that excellent home run to bring them into the game against Meza. Like, sometimes you got to tip your cap.
Yeah, and Carlos Santana had an amazing game. Like, he almost had 2 dingers in that one. Adam Frazier was awesome for the Mariners. Andres Munoz is just a stone-cold killer. That's a guy I did not know enough about before this series, because he is, at least right now, borderline unhittable. The dude's unreal. So, yeah, you're right. Like, they did a lot of really, really good things. It's just a shame that And game one, right? Like, you also got to you talk about giving
Sure.
credit to the Mariners. Like, here's another angle. The guy the Mariners go make a big deadline splash to get and pay $20+ million a year through 7 shutout innings, Jose Barrios sat in a hoodie, right? Like, you want to talk about how things could have been differently. Well, what if Jose Barrios was the ace the Jays wanted, right?
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, it would have been Manoah Gosman anyways, but it just kind of adds to the frustration of the whole thing when it's like, yeah, you see the other team and their pieces doing so well, and it's like, Jays just don't quite get that.
Yeah, and I mean, the challenge is it's hard for the Jays to go all in and pull off the trade for Luis Castillo when they went all in last year to get Barrios. They traded Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson, 2 of their best prospects, and that leaves them behind with, I mean, what we're looking at right now is the Jays' 2 best prospects are Gabe Moreno and Ricky Tiedemann, 2 players who are pretty close to contributing. So do you go all in again and get rid of those 2 guys to make a run with this group? Was Luis Castillo going to be the difference maker? Maybe. I don't know. Like, yeah, if he had that exact same start in game 1 for the Jays, then sure. But, I don't know. I mean, 7 years ago, David Price, he was fantastic in the regular season, and they gave up a lot to get him, and it was certainly worthwhile, but he wasn't an automatic 7 innings of shutout guy in the playoffs for them. It's not a guarantee. Like, it's not that Luis Castillo was locked and loaded to put in that perfect start in game 1, no matter the situation. But no, I don't blame people for being disappointed in the deadline when you go back and look in hindsight. And I mean, I can see it from both sides. The front office can't go all in every single season, but yeah, there was a lot left to be desired. They didn't acquire any star players, and it kind of did show. It seems the Jays looked in that playoff series very young and very inexperienced in a lot of spots. It was Alek Manoah, not a great start from the guy who's becoming Rice. It was, Bo and Vlad, like same thing. They had opportunities to come up and they didn't. It was John Schneider. He's a rookie manager who made a rookie move. You can look everywhere. They just look inexperienced. And the nice thing for the Jays is that this isn't 2015-16. It's not like their group's full of older guys and this is the end. It should hopefully be a good learning experience for them. Hopefully they come back and they're more grizzled playoff veterans next time around.
Yep.
But who knows? There's so many things you can say.
Yeah, and certainly you're hoping for a bit of a learning experience, but the other side of that for me is, okay, last year they missed by a game, and it was frustrating, but we were like, hey, this team and this core is going to be around for a while. They should be able to run things back next year. And at the beginning of the season, they were like, the up-and-coming team that can maybe make a push, go on a World Series run, right? The power rankings loved them. And now I just feel like the pressure's on a little bit, right? These 2 years, they disappointed at the end of it. But we're sitting here going like, okay, they're learning lessons. Last year it was like, okay, they're close. They'll take another step next year. And now I'm just kind of sitting here being like, next year's World Series are bust, in my opinion. Like, it's the excuses are kind of all gone now. You have your manager of the future. I don't think anyone with any baseball knowledge at all is going to disagree with that in the slightest. So you have your manager of the future. You have all your core pieces in line here. You need to start making runs. There's no more sitting here like 12 months from now, if they're eliminated and not playing baseball on October 9th, you and I can't sit here and be like, well, it was another good learning experience. Like, it'll be a flat out failure. So I think I agree, like a little bit of wiggle room this year because they're learning. For a lot of them, this was their first true playoff experience, all of that stuff. But going forward now, it's World Series or bust.
Yeah, and I mean, we can do this for a couple of years. We can say, the 2020 year, it kind of set the expectations a little weirdly because they technically made the playoffs, even though they were an 8 seed in a short season. 2021, they don't make the playoffs, but, they had a lot of things behind them go wrong. They spent half the season on the road, blah, blah, blah. So there was excuses there. This year, there wasn't really anything wrong. It was a normal season. They played all 81 games in Toronto. They didn't deal with a tremendous amount of bad luck with injuries. I mean, Hyunjin Ryu went down, but I'm not sure anybody even really expected he was going to be a huge part of the team this year. Otherwise, things largely bounced in their favor. They were the first wildcard team. They got home field. Like, everything was set up for them to do well, and hopefully they can come back next year more equipped to handle such a moment, because if they don't, then, well, they're justifiably labeled as a team that choked. And I'm not going to say that just now, that this is a team that can't get it done because they're flawed, cracks in the foundation. They're not, whatever, X, Y, and Z. But if they do it again, then you kind of have to wonder, is the whole thing a little rotten?
Yeah, and that's why I think there's just a lot of pressure on this team heading into next season. And we'll cover that a lot throughout the offseason when we do these podcasts and whatnot. But I think, yeah, there's no more being the cute young Jays team who's just up and coming. Like, you've kind of arrived to some extent now. You're all established major leaguers for the most part, and next year's a big year. So let's talk a little bit about this. In what ways can the Jays get better next season? I think the obvious ones are sort of internal improvements. You know, you get Vladdy back up to maybe you get him back to a close to MVP level next season, right? Because while this year was very good, I'm not trying to say he did not have a very good season, and maybe we were just spoiled with that insane 2021 season, but getting Vladdy to maybe a middle point there, where he might not hit 48 dingers next year, but maybe he hits you 42, right? He finds that middle ground where, again, not a historic season, but he's back to a superstar level, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So maybe that happens, right? Maybe Bo's bat stays a little bit more consistent throughout the year. Maybe Jose Barrios has a bounce back season. That's certainly a way that they could improve a little bit. You figure out the bullpen. That's going to be a big one as well, although it wasn't as big of a problem this year as it was in years past. And I'm not going to say George Springer stays healthy because I'm writing off him ever playing like 140 plus games in a season. So that's not one of them. But I think, there are areas just internally where I think they can improve heading into next year. That's fair to say.
I think that's reasonable. And I mean, the reality is barring some, Kawhi Leonard-esque Raptors style all-in trade where they, trade away a core player like a DeRozan. We always talk about this. The Toronto teams, it's always the same perspective. The Raptors went ahead and traded franchise icon to get Kawhi Leonard, who ultimately pushed them over the top. It was a huge risk. And people talk about, should the Leafs do that? Should they trade Mitch Marner? Should they trade Nylander? Blah, blah, blah. And now we're probably going to have a winter of speculation where we talk about this with the Jays. The entire team is pretty much largely intact next year. Most players are under control, are eligible to go arbitration, something like that. The only marquee free agent, I guess, they have is Stripling. They could give him a qualifying offer. Who knows if he accepts it or if he goes, whatever. But, Bo, Vlad, Springer, Chapman, Teoscar, Gurriel, Whit Merrifield, Danny Jansen, Alejandro Kirk, Santiago Espinal, they're all back next year unless there's a move to be made. And it's the same thing with the pitchers too. The starting pitchers, Manoah, Gausman, Barrios, Kikuchi, they're there next year. The relievers, they're all under control again. All those guys they got at the trade deadline are back next year. Nobody was a rental. So the front office has to decide, I guess, if they're going to do a big shake-up move this offseason or if it's just going to be retooling and augmenting. Yeah. And then I think, speaking of pressure, the place where there's pressure next year is that the Jays didn't make that big trade deadline splash in 2022. And given how it worked for Seattle with Castillo, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure next time around on the front office. I think it was the same thing for Anthopoulos in 2015 when he did pretty much nothing in 2014. And you had those headlines about Bautista and Casey Janssen. The veterans were pissed off because they got no reinforcements. I don't know if the Blue Jays this year were sitting around being like, oh, geez, they didn't get us reinforcements because they did add a few guys. But it's going to be a huge narrative that the front office didn't make the big push, and maybe they will next year.
So if they were to make a big splash this winter, the free agent list I don't think is super kind in terms of meeting their needs for hitters. You look at who kind of the top tier guys are. Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson, both shortstops. They both bat right. You're not backing up the truck for either of those guys because I don't view them as kind of perfect fits, although I know Turner can move around the diamond, or maybe you move Bo around the diamond if you do that. But I don't see them as being willing to go dish out $250 to $300 million to get a Swanson, Turner. Swanson won't get that, but Turner, Judge. I don't think they're going to be major players in that high-end free agent market. Is that fair of me to think?
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, if you look back at the last few off seasons, it was a pretty big contract for Ryu, then a huge contract for Springer, and a huge contract for Gausman, as well as the huge extension for Barrios. So they've made some pretty significant financial investments, and I'm not sure I would necessarily expect them to be in the mix to do another one this year, given, they already have $100 million committed to 6 or 7 guys who are signed for next year, plus all these different arbitrations they're going to have to deal with. So I think it's more about getting their house in order than it is going and making a huge ad. And if they do make a huge ad, I think it'll probably be through a trade. So that would be my guess.
If they were to make a huge ad through a trade, you got to give to get. I think, there are a handful of flat out untouchables, right? You're not trading Manoah, you're not trading Vlad, you're not trading Bo Bichette. There's guys who you kind of just assume are not going anywhere for certain, Chapman, you're obviously not trading is what I'm saying. You're obviously not trading a George Springer. But the guys who I think it's a realistic possibility, Teoscar Hernandez is probably in that group. He would have a ton of value.
Would he? 1 year away from free agency, corner outfielder who doesn't defend that well.
I think there's teams who would be lining up to get their hands on Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they would be interested in making that trade, but I don't know if they're going to give up something significant back.
I'm looking at it from a perspective right now, of like, if you're going to bring in a significant piece, like you look at the way their lineup kind of is, right? So you have Teoscar, Springer, Gurriel in the outfield, Bo, Espinal, Chapman, Vladdy. That's your infield with the three-headed monster behind the plate. Like if you're going to bring in a significant piece, they need to play, right? You need a spot for them to play every day. And if you're going to go get a big left-handed bat who you're like, they're an everyday player, they're an all-star level left-handed bat, you need to free up a spot somewhere in the lineup for them, right? So that would likely involve moving out a Teoscar, a Lourdes Gurriel Jr., maybe Espinal's not safe. I don't know. He had an all-star season, but like you'd have to move someone off this roster, DeRozan-esque kind of thing, although maybe not to that level with the guys I'm naming. But is that something you'd be fine with if we got a big deal and there's a left-handed bat and it's a Gurriel or a Hernandez going out the door because of it? Are you okay with that? Or are you sitting here going, part of what maybe makes this team or could make this team so special is that they seem to have a really deep connection. They have really good chemistry, and Hernandez and Gurriel are two key pieces and key drivers of that chemistry in the clubhouse. So would you be nervous about moving pieces like that?
Yeah, that's the challenge is you can come up with all these players they could get to add to make the team better, but someone's got to go. I mean, you can't just run it back with the exact same team, but also add two guys. Like you said, so they have to decide who it's going to be that they move. I really don't think that either Hernandez or Gurriel, who are pretty close to free agency and are kind of similar-ish players, are going to command an amazing return. And unfortunately, moving them to it's going to be more about opening up the spot for somebody else. So it's kind of that kind of move. I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about. It's a weird thing to think what the huge move is that they need to do, or if the right move is just simply running it back with the same guys now that they're more experienced and they've gone through it a little bit. We always talk about it almost feels like you only really get one chance and then you get labeled as a choker and everybody's worried about making all these changes to fix this problem that's clearly there. Maybe there isn't a significant problem there. Maybe they just had a bad go this time around. Maybe they just got in their own heads and they were nervous. And then next time around, they'll be fine. Maybe they don't need to make a huge move. Maybe that move comes at next year's trade deadline. It's difficult to predict because you look at the team and we've seen them be good. We know what they look like when they're hitting their stride and they're playing at their best. And the key is just having that happen at the right time. And I don't know if shuffling the deck chairs or sending a bunch of guys out and bringing a whole bunch of new guys in is really the move. It's really hard to say. I don't know if there's a right answer.
You know who's going to be talked in all likelihood, because I don't think the team's going to be good next year. You know who's going to be talked about in next year's deadline?
Who?
Shohei Ohtani.
Oh yeah,
he's got He's got the 1 year deal with the LA Angels, right? $30 million, and he's a unrestricted free agent next winter. If you're the Jays and someone comes at you with an offer you somewhat like for, again, star level player. I don't even know who the player is. I haven't sat around and dug into who could be available this winter. But this team goes, yeah, we want Ricky Tiedemann. We want Gabriel Moreno. We want one of your high-end prospects. And you're the Jays. Is there not a little part of you, similar to how NBA teams for a full calendar year plus sat there and planned everything because Giannis was a free agent? If you're the Jays, do you kind of not operate a little bit this winter going, we could get to August and Shohei Ohtani's on the block. And we need to be the team that's ready to push our chips in and have everything ready to go to get Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a guy to go all in on, that's the guy. And I mean, that truly is the name. It's such a spectacular talent, having somebody that can hit at like a damn near MVP level, and then also pitch at a damn near Cy Young level. It's Catherine Vladdy and Manoah combined into one guy, which is insane. Like I think if there was one player to run it all in for, that's the guy. And do you try and get that done in the off season, or do you wait for the middle of the year and see what happens? I don't know. Like,
well, like I don't. So they avoided arbitration with him. They set that record, $30 million contract 1 year. I guess if you're the Angels and you get the sense from Ohtani in his camp that, hey, we're going to free agency next year. We're not coming back to LA. Then maybe this winter they're more tempted. But the reason I'm kind of like, I think it happens at the deadline is just because you have the stuff with their ownership and all of that. And again, they're running out of years with Mike Trout. I think they're going to give it one more run of like, let's try to get competitive quickly over the winter. Let's try to make some moves and let's try to make the playoffs next year. I don't see the path towards them doing that, which is why I think Ohtani will eventually be available. But I'm not sure if that's a winter deal.
Yeah, you'd think, because, and this is kind of a corny way of looking at the whole thing, but I think if you do acquire Ohtani, you'd like to have the qualifying offer as a thing. He's obviously not going to accept the qualifying offer, but you'd like to have that backup as opposed to acquiring him at the trade deadline, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I think if there was a situation in which I'd be comfortable with the Jays just really going for it, it would be just do the Ohtani deal in February or March. You know, we all talked about Jose Ramirez. That was the big thing last spring. And they wound up not doing it. They did Chapman instead, which is fine. But
it worked out. He was one of the guys who really contributed over those 2 games in the playoffs. Like, he had a good year.
And he had a lot of really good quotes afterwards, too. I mean, if you go through and look at who was saying what after the game, he was the one who helped console Alek Manoah after the difficult game 1 start. He's the one saying, hey, look, like, it's a learning experience. Like, we got to take this and get better for next time, which is nice. He's saying all the right things. It shows good leadership. But, you know, if next March rolls around and there's talk about the Ohtani thing, then why not? Just pull the trigger. Make it happen. That's the big deal everyone's looking for.
Well, yeah, that'd be it. And the other thing, too, is, you know, we talk about not wanting to disrupt this core, but the bottom line is, this team is good enough they're good enough to stay in contention all year, kind of thing, right? We're not talking about a group that's going to like stumble out of the gates so hard that they're 15 games under 500 come July. And we're sitting here being like, oh shit, season's over already. Like, how did that happen? Like, no, Manoah, Gausman, like, they're good enough to push for a playoff spot, where I don't think it would be a colossal mistake to sit here and kind of keep your powder dry a little bit throughout the winter and go, hey, we're saving our bullets for the deadline. You know, I at first I was kind of sitting here going, can you really run into next season with all 3 catchers? Can you have Jansen, Kirk, and Moreno on your roster to start next season? And I kind of think you almost can with the DH spot. You can run some sort of a rotation. Is Moreno ready for everyday MLB duty next season at the age of 22? I don't know. But I think you can run with those 3. And again, wait till the deadline to make your decision.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Like, it's the more you kind of talk it out and just process it, it's like the panic move isn't ideal. You know, you come out of a game like this and it was such a disaster and it was just so fucked. Like, I think you can make the argument it was, I don't know, probably a top 5, top 3 worst losses in franchise history. Like, it's one of the most absurd playoff games you'll ever see. Like, I think that was the biggest deficit that a team has come back from on the road in a playoff game, which is kind of hilarious. But I don't think you really win by making panic decisions. And as lame as it is to sit here and be like, you know what, let's just run it back with the same group, that honestly might be the move. As weird as that is, and maybe the solution comes up at the trade deadline. I think you look back in hindsight and no, they probably didn't do enough at the trade deadline this year, but that'll probably pressure them to do something bigger at next year's trade deadline. And that's part of the learning experience.
I think we'll agree on this, but even if they go into free agency, don't get an impact bat, or maybe it's just a bench bat who's a good lefty hitter or something like that. They probably either need to bring back Stripling, or they need to sign a starter, right?
Yes.
Because there's nothing, like, you can't go into next year with, if you lost Stripling and did not replace him, what's your rotation next year? It would be like
Manoah, Gausman, Barrios, Kikuchi, and your number 5 all of a sudden is going to be Mitch White.
Yeah, like, you can't do that. I think you can maybe start next season with a Kikuchi / White as your 5-6.
That's fine. That's 5-6. But you need a 4.
You need Barrios is your 4. You need a 3.
And you hope that Barrios is better than your 4, given the financial commitment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You really have to. He really needs to rebound. That's a pretty significant X factor for the team. If he can't be the pitcher they thought he was going to be, then that wound up being a very poor investment, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Ross Stripling, age 32. Your qualifying offer, no doubt that's happening.
Undoubtedly, yeah. You have to at least put yourself in a position where you can get the draft pick. Like last year, they had the 2 compensatory draft picks, and that was very helpful for them restocking their cupboard. And it's something that will help them either this winter or next year when it comes to making a big trade.
Yep. But I look at Stripling, if he was 29, I'd be like, hey, there's a chance he takes that and says, I'm going to prove for one more season that I'm legit, and then I'm going to cash it in my age 30 year. He's 32. Is he going to take a 1-year risk? I think he's going to be searching Steven Matz kind of deal here, where he goes, I want a 3-year deal. I want 50+ million in my pocket, or 40+ million in my pocket guaranteed. Because he's going to be 33 in November. Like he's not going to run the risk of a 1-year deal. But I think the Jays should really be looking at bringing him back.
I agree. You can send him to if you think back to 2015, Marco Estrada, pretty similar situation. They acquired a guy in the previous offseason, 1-for-1 trade for Adam Lind. And it was like, okay, this guy's going to be a long reliever spot starter. He joined the rotation halfway through the year and he was fantastic. The Jays gave him the qualifying offer and they just worked out a 2-year deal. And it was an ideal thing for both sides. The Jays had a good veteran starter for the next couple of years. Maybe that's the move. Maybe there's a team out there who's willing to offer. The Jays have given Tanner Rourke and Yusei Kikuchi 5 consecutive years of $12 million annually. So, there's got to be a team out there. And Steve Matz, look at the money he got last year as well after he's been up and down his whole career. There's surely going to be a team out there who's willing to give 3 years, $36 million to Ross Stripling. Are the Jays going to be the ones to do it? Who knows? But at the very least, they should get themselves a draft pick out of it.
And then it's going to be the bullpen upgrade as well, right? I think the pieces are there for a good bullpen. Romano, I'm still a big Tim Maiza fan. I like Jimmy Garcia. I think Zach Pop is a guy with tremendous potential when you look at a 6'4" young arm with the stuff that he has. I do think, though, probably one impact free agent reliever is on the list of things you need to do this winter, or you trade for one, I guess, if that's a possibility. But impact reliever and making sure you either bring back Stripling or go get an equal level quality starter, right? Those are the 2 big offseason things we're probably looking for.
Yeah, something like that. And maybe bringing Stripling back's the guy, but they have to get a competent left-handed bat to be in the lineup that can be something close to an everyday player, not a Kevin Biggio. And then you're right, they have to add to the bullpen as well. Because at the end of the day, the bullpen did shit its pants. So there has to be some kind of upgrade there.
Yep, 100%. We're going to cover it all throughout the winter. Not sure about the regularity of these, but we'll probably do them every few weeks or so, especially when there's breaking news, we'll have a pod out. And we'll probably do a few throughout the playoffs here as well. Coombsy, it's a damn shame, hey?
It is. It's unfortunate. I came into game 2, and I guess for anybody who did listen to the first podcast we did, I was feeling quite good about them winning game 2. It really seemed like, okay, them hitting Robbie Ray was going to be a thing that happened. And it did. And, Gosman was pitching well too. It really seemed like they had it locked up. And then, winner take all game 3. No guarantee they would have won that game, but it felt as though they should have had that opportunity. And it's difficult to accept that they don't. It's going to be a long, frustrating winter after that conclusion, but what can you say? That's baseball.
Before we go, I need to give some love to our friends at PointsBet Canada. Just looking at the odds they have up on their site right now. The Yankees are opening up as -210 favorites to beat the Cleveland Guardians. What a moment that was in Cleveland with Oscar Gonzalez hitting that walk-off dinger in the 1 millionth inning or whatever the fuck happened there. And then there was the Houston Astros. They are -225 favorites against the Seattle Mariners in that series. So
who are you cheering for?
Oh, God.
I'm pulling for Seattle. I have no qualms with this team at all.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a lot of Canadians who are Mariners fans, so that's an easy team to root for. I'm probably just going to end up, not hopping on the bandwagon, but I'll support some NL team. Maybe the Mets or Phillies or something. I don't know. Mets fans seem like they've been through so much. Maybe they deserve it.
They're funny, yeah. That's an entertaining team. But if we're looking at the field in the AL, it's like, I don't want the Yankees. I still don't like the Astros. I don't think they're cheating anymore. I don't even know how much of a thing that really was, but I still don't like them. I just don't.
Yeah.
Cleveland's boring. I still have bad memories from 2016. So I think I'll pull for Seattle out of the AL, honestly. I think it's more vindicating for the Jays if the team you lost to in that fashion then goes on a run, as opposed to them getting like swept by Houston. Then it's like, wow, you couldn't even beat the team that got swept by Houston. You are very far from being good.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll have a few more of these throughout the rest of the playoffs here and all that good stuff. Coombsy, I didn't even look how many episodes of this we crushed out throughout the year, but there was a lot. This was what? This was episode 119, and we would have started the season back on... Oh, man. We crushed like 60 of these out this year.
Yeah, probably 50 or 60. You do them every 3 games, 162 games, so that's at least 50.
Yeah, we crushed out a lot of these. It was a pleasure, and we will have more. Enjoy your winter.
We'll be back. Best wishes.
Thanks for tuning in to Blue Jays Nation Radio, a member of the Nation Network of podcasts and delivered by DoorDash. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.